and welcome to Catholic Faith Forum. I am Nonso Igwe. Today we'll be talking about heaven and hell. A lot of religions see heaven and hell as places where good and bad people respectively will spend the remainder of eternity after their lives here on earth. However, there are a lot of misconceptions about these places. And that's what we'll be discussing today on Catholic Faith Forum. Don't go anywhere. When we come back from the short break, we'll dive into our discussion and then meet our guests. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Catholic Faith Forum and I'm Nonso Igwe. As mentioned before, we'll be talking about heaven and hell. Today, our guest is Reverend Father Andrew Toye. Welcome, Father.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And you don't even sound hype. See the way I hyped you. Okay, so today we're talking about heaven and hell.
Yes.
Places or concepts.
Okay.
What is heaven and hell to you? Or what are these places or concepts? I don't know.
Okay. Starts off. One of the fundamental questions we ask ourselves as human beings is where are we going?
Okay.
Okay. And Christianity perfectly answers this question or directly gives an answer to this question that heaven is our final destination. Heaven is our home. And we've been given everything to ensure our safe arrival. We've been given the roadmap, you know, the book of life to show us the path. Virtues and graces are there to help us journey well, just to ensure our safe arrival. However, some persons on this journey will be distracted and will arrive at another destination. Okay. And when you are in a place separate from your home, you don't find peace, you don't find joy, you don't find fulfillment. And that gives us an idea of what heaven and hell is. Heaven is our natural final destination. Well, for some reasons, some persons will end up in this other destination. So to put it in a simple definition, heaven is where God is, together with his communion of saints. And there, according to 1 John chapter 3 verse 2, that we will see God face to face. And because we see God face to face, he is now the object of our joy, our happiness, the long life that we will enjoy there. And hell is a place where God is not. Okay? It's a place where God is not. It's a place where the devil and maybe we'll call it the community of his agents, you know, they stay. So heaven, simply put, is where God is, together with his community of saints.
Okay.
And hell is where God is not. Okay,
so if you say where God is not, but then we know that we all have this perception that God is everywhere.
Okay.
So then when we say God isn't in hell, isn't that, I mean,
yes,
contrary to what we always believe?
Not really. Because if we want to resolve that, we'll say that God is not as present to those in heaven as he is present to those in hell. Yeah. If we want to insist on his presence in hell, he's not as present to them as he is to those.
So he knows what is happening there.
Yes.
It's just that it doesn't stay there.
Yeah.
So do you think that we can fully understand heaven and hell?
Well, when we talk about divine mysteries of God, transcendental realities like heaven and hell, we usually rely on the authenticity of divine revelation, you know, the scripture. Because as finite being, we cannot fully exhaust knowledge about infinite realities.
I like where you put it.
Like heaven and hell, yeah. And the way I usually look at it is that we can know these things certainly, but we can't understand them completely. And I feel that's what St. Paul was trying to tell us in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verse 12, that we see these things as though through a glass, a dim glass. You know, if you have a thick glass and you look through it, you can know that there's an object at the other side, but you can't completely describe what the object is. So we know for certain that these things exist, okay? But in terms of, you know, describing how it is, we may not be able to fully do that.
Okay, so the thing about heaven and hell is, I for one always have this thoughts in my mind that, okay, the concept of heaven, the place heaven and hell. some cultures don't have any idea of heaven or hell. So are they exempted from going to these places as heaven or hell
Okay.
eventually?
I want to believe that in such cultures, they have an understanding of reward for good and punishment for evil. Even though the concept of good and evil is somewhat subjective, but we have this general way of behavior and this general conception of what is good and what is evil. So if they have that in their culture, then they have some idea of what heaven and hell is all about. And Lumen Gentium, one of the documents of the Second Vatican Council, anticipates this type of question in the number 16. That there are some persons who, due to no fault of theirs, have not received, the light of the gospel. Then these people may, that's the way the document puts it, may be saved because judgment is left for God. But it all still boils down to this idea of punishment for evil and reward for good. If you live a good life, then you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. But if you live a bad life, even if you don't believe in hell, you will still be punished for it.
Nice. I like the way you put it there. Just hold that thought there. When we come back from this short break, we'll continue our discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is still Catholic Faith Forum, and we're discussing heaven and hell. So my next question would be on, the world we live in today is an open world, technology, data, facts. People want to know that this is a fact. So, and then we've heard accounts of people who say, oh, hell or heaven, and heaven rather, do not exist because there's no facts backing this up. So what do you have to say about this?
Well, it depends on the facts and figures you are looking for. We all think science has monopoly of facts and figures, and that is not true. And science even lacks the tool to investigate or interrogate our subject matter, heaven and hell, because science believes that if it's not physical, it's not real.
Yes.
And from experience, we know that is not visible to the eyes doesn't mean that it's not in existence.
Real,
yeah. So it depends on the kind of facts and figures we are looking for. There are so many other facts and figures. We have historical facts. We have faith-based facts, okay? And the Bible is a historical book. And then we have historical facts. We have the fact that Enoch went to heaven. We have Elijah in the presence of people was taken to heaven. We have our Lord Jesus Christ
yes.
in the presence of people ascended into heaven. We have his disciples had visions of heaven. We have saints in the Catholic Church who wrote about their visions of heaven. And if you even go to YouTube and type near-death experiences, you have people
giving their
personal
accounts,
testimony of, their experience or near-death experiences and all of those things. This we should consider as facts. So it depends on the kind of facts you're looking for. If you're looking for scientific facts, you may not get that so much. But all of these others are also facts.
But I've heard some stories of some people who say, oh, they went to hell. And they start mentioning people who we knew. Oh, I saw this person in hell, gnashing their teeth and crying. Okay. What's the implication of such stories? Since you're talking about facts being in experiences that people have, I believe that if they also come out and say, oh, I had this experience, you can then say we believe them as well. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, we are always careful to admit some of these stories.
Because it's about hell.
Yes, we should be careful admitting them, but we cannot say that there are people who have had these experiences, okay? That's why the church is usually very slow to allow such stories to fly
out, yeah.
You understand? But it doesn't mean that people do not have such experiences.
And people have also said things, I don't know if you've heard it before, people saying that, oh, hell is just formulated to make people do the right thing. Do you think that's true? To some extent, I do think it's true, but I don't know how true this is, so I want to hear from you.
Well, you mean by that to instill fear on people so that
they'll do things in the right way?
Well, this whole concept of using hell as a tool to get people to conform to the norm, I think it's more of this Pentecostal, Protestant concept. At some point they turned the good news about Jesus into the bad news of hell. And the implication of that is enormous. Okay, it's like a king who loves to marry someone and the person doesn't love him in return. And the person cannot just express that I don't love the king, because he or she knows the implication.
Yeah.
And because of fear of what people will say, fear
Exactly,
of tradition, the person will have to conform and agree to marry the king. The king will not say no, but the person in question will not be fulfilled. It will just be doing things because she was asked to do it. So when it comes to being fulfilled in a Christian journey, we should not go via negative, in the negative, fear of hell and all of those things. We should go in a positive way. God will love us to love him because of who he is, and not to align with him because we are afraid of hell.
But we've seen so many teachings here and there. I mean, late last year, there was a sudden eruption of different women coming out to say, oh, Jesus said we should not do this. If we do this, we go to hell. God said we should not do this. If you do this, you go to hell. Oh, don't wear this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do you think that those things are really necessary and important in this day and age?
They are not necessary. Okay? The point is, people should learn to love God.
Yeah.
And just like I said, the focus shouldn't be on the negative when we have the positive. It's supposed to be a good news.
Exactly.
Not a news to get people scared or afraid. Just like Jesus said, just preach the truth and the truth will set us free. You know, the fear of hell will only, sometimes it works. You know,
you've agreed though.
No. The point is,
okay.
You get people. That's an imperfect way of getting people conform to the norm. But it's not about the crowd that we pull. It's about the quality of what we preach. Okay, God will prefer us to tell people the truth, to teach the right things.
Yes.
And of course, people will naturally, when people know about who God is, they will learn to love him for who he truly is.
Thank you. Hold on there. We're going on this short break. We have to learn a little about our saints today. Stay with us.
Today we are talking about Saint Michael the Archangel. Saint Michael the Archangel isn't a saint, but rather he is an angel and the leader of all the angels and the army of God. This is what the title Archangel means, that he is above all the others in rank. Saint Michael has 4 main responsibilities or offices as we know from scripture and Christian tradition. The first is to combat Satan. The second is to escort the faithful to heaven at their hour of death. The third is to be a champion of all Christians and the church itself. And the fourth is to call men from life on earth to their heavenly judgment. Very little is known about this great saint other than what we know from scriptures, which themselves are sparse. In the book of Daniel, Saint Michael is mentioned twice. The first time as one who helped Daniel, and the second time he is mentioned with regards to the end times of the world when he will stand for God's people. His next mention comes in the epistle of St. Jude, where St. Michael is said to guard the tombs of Moses and Eve and has contended with Satan over the body of Moses. The final mention of this great saint is in Revelation, where St. Michael and his angels do battle with the dragon. Today, St. Michael is invoked for protection, especially from lethal enemies. He is also the patron of soldiers, police, and doctors.
Welcome back. This is Caliphate Forum, and we're still talking about heaven and hell. So now, there's one thing that always makes me worry, and that's talking about mercy. You spoke about teaching people about the love of God, and then the truth will set them free eventually. So then the mercy of God. For me, I feel it's being tested when people talk about hell. Because if God is so merciful, why is there hell?
If God is so merciful, why is there? Well, people who argue this way perhaps lack the understanding of how the divine mercy works.
Okay.
Especially in relation to our free will. Okay. There is this quotation from St. Augustine that I love so much, that the God who created you without your consent cannot save you without your consent.
Yeah.
Okay. The mercy of God is always there in abundance. you have to make the move to tap into
Tap
it.
into it, yeah.
So hell is not, it's not God who puts people in hell. You know, hell is a consequence of accumulated choices that we've made in during our timeline on earth. So it's the divine mercy is always there, but we choose not to access it in order to gain it for heaven. Yeah, and each time we do that, it is not God who, the consequence is hell. So it is not actually God who chooses hell for us. We are the one who do so for ourselves. So God helps us. He supplies all of these graces in abundance, and it's left for you to either say, okay, I will use them or not. So when we end up in hell, when some people, let me not say we, yeah, it's just a consequence of their choices.
So do you then think that this idea of hell, going to this place called hell, has shaped the way we think as Christians, even the way we react and act? I mean, act out our daily lives. Do you think this is affected?
Well, I think we are focusing so much on hell.
There's heaven at the
yes, that should be the focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Hell is the aside. You know, it's not a goal.
Exactly.
Hell is not a goal. Heaven is the focus. So let us put more energy into focusing on heaven. Okay. But just like you said, the idea of heaven and hell has shaped the way we look at things and the way we behave. You can actually see someone and say, this is a citizen of heaven. Okay, and look at that other person's behavior and say, let me not say a citizen of heaven, but this person is not walking the right path towards heaven. Okay, so I think to some extent that is correct, that the idea of heaven and hell, the idea of reward for good and evil has shaped the way we behave. Everybody wants to align to good things.
Yes.
Yeah, so they will struggle to meet up with that.
Now let's go to there's something that I want to talk about now. That's on Judgment Day. I know, like, since I've been young, or since I was young rather, and I always wonder, like, oh, will I go to heaven immediately I die, or would there be a time frame? I always pondered this. So do people go to heaven immediately they die, or there's actually a day where everyone will be called? Oh yeah, you this side, you this place, everyone, this person, all that.
Well, there are many parables that describe what you are talking about from Jesus. But I feel, or not just I feel, that is what it is. There are two kinds of judgment. There are particular judgment and the general judgment at the end of time. And the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 27, helps us to understand the fact that after death comes judgment. This is what we call the particular judgment. So anyone who dies today faces judgment, and it's decides whether the person, God decides whether the person goes to heaven, or from the way the person lived on earth, he goes to heaven or hell. Then in our profession of faith, we also profess that he will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead. So that is the final judgment, the general judgment, when Christ will come again to judge the living and the dead.
So what's the best way to make heaven? I don't want to talk about hell again. So what's the best way of to make heaven?
The best way to make heaven is to intensify your knowledge of God.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and that requires having that intimate moment with him. If you want to know someone, you have to be with the person. Exactly. Yeah, and that is what heaven is all about, being with God. So you can actually live in heaven on earth. So this whole idea of, it's at the end of life that we'll see heaven is not entirely true. Yes, that is when the judgment, it will be decided. But we can actually be a citizen of heaven from earth, by ensuring that we get very close to God. To God. Heaven is where God is. And just you were mentioning something about whether heaven is a place or a concept. Or a concept, yeah. We want to avoid giving the impression that heaven is a physical location, bound by matter, space, and time. And that is why some theologians have said that heaven is a state of being with God. A state of being. Yes, it's a place, but more or less a state of being. A state of being with God. So if we can achieve that here on earth, we are already very close to heaven. And it begins with knowledge of God. Exactly. Because from the Penny Catechism, why are we here? To know him, to love him, and to serve him. Knowing him is the first step to loving him. And once you can love God, you will even shun hating, being afraid of hell.
Yeah.
Because loving God leads you straight to him.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for coming today. We're not going anywhere until we learn a little about our faith. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Know Your Faith series. I am Collins, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about the Cardinal Virtues. Now, Philippians 4:8 says, "My brothers, your thoughts should be wholly directed to all that is true, all that deserves respect, all that is honest, pure, admirable, decent, virtuous, or worthy of praise." Now, with this in mind, the classic definition of a virtue is a habit or firm disposition which inclines a person to do good and avoid evil. Characterized by stability, a virtuous person not only strives to be a good person, but also seeks what is good and chooses to act in a good way. Now, according to the Catholic teachings, the 7 virtues that affect human beings in the material and spiritual aspect of life. There are 4 cardinal virtues and 3 theological virtues. But on today's episode, we'll be talking about the cardinal virtues. The 4 primary moral virtues, which are called the cardinal virtues, are prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. The word cardinal itself derives from the Latin word cardo, meaning hinge. Consequently, these 4 virtues are called cardinal because all other virtues are categorized under them and hinge upon them. Now, the book of wisdom of the Old Testament states that, "For wisdom teaches temperance and prudence, justice and fortitude, and nothing in life is more useful for men than these." Now, the first, which is prudence, the mother of all virtues, is the virtue by which a person recognizes his moral duty and the good means to accomplish it. Actually, prudence is part of the definition of goodness. A person can be prudent and good only simultaneously. No other virtue can contradict what is prudent. Therefore, what is prudent substantially is what is good. And prudence is the measure of justice, temperance, and fortitude. St. Thomas Aquinas defined justice as a habit whereby a man renders to each one his due with constant and perpetual will. The first duty in justice is towards God. We have the duty to pray, to worship, to obey God, and who has shown us great love to each one of us and whom we must love above all things. In justice to God, we uphold vows taken to him and make sacrifices for the sake of his love, such as accepting martyrdom rather than abandoning faith. Now, the second duty is injustice towards our neighbor. A person must not only refrain from doing evil towards his neighbor, but also do what is good towards his neighbor. As such, a person must respect the rights of each person and establish relationships which promote equity among all people and build up the common good. Justice can be of different types. The first is the commutative justice, which is based on the principle of quid pro quo, which is Latin for this, for that. Commutative justice requires, for example, that a customer pay a fair price for a worthwhile goods. Now, the second is distributive justice, which involves the relationship between one and many, between an individual and a group, a person and the government, for example. And the third is social justice, which is concerned with the relationship between individuals and groups, between one another and everyone. The common good and equal treatment are the cornerstones of social justice. Now, the next virtue, which is fortitude, enables a person to stand firm against and endure the hardships of life, and to remain steadfast in pursuing what is good. Here, such as steadfastness and endurance reflects the soul's clinging into what is good. Genuine fortitude does not entail making sacrifices or risking one's life arbitrarily or foolishly. However, genuine fortitude is always exercised in accord with reason, assesses the true nature and value of things, that is, asking whether something is really worth sacrificing for, and involves a just cause. Fortitude strengthens the individual's resolve to resist temptation, overcome personal weakness, and make sacrifices for what is good. And finally, the virtue of temperance. It enables a person to keep his passions and emotions under control of reason. While temperance moderates a person's attractions to pleasures and gives balances in the use of created goods, it also involves using these goods in a good way. Here, one approaches pleasure and the use of created goods in the light of faith, of reason, and of one's own vocation and circumstances of life. So that's it. Those are the 4 cardinal virtues. Please feel free to share, comment. You can also share with us, comment in a particular virtue that you probably have an experience with, or friends, or whatever it may be. Feel free to share in the comment section. Also subscribe to our channel at Dominican Media Presents on YouTube. And until I come your way next time, be bold and be Catholic.
Thank you for sticking with us till the end of the show. Don't forget that you can reach out to us with your support on our email or phone number. Kindly look to the screen below. You can send us your questions or suggestions on our social media platforms at CFF on TV. Also, don't forget that you can watch this episode and other episodes on our YouTube channel at Dominican Media Presents. Till next time, keep being saints in jeans and shirts.